Due to the following CBS School Break special, Magnum PI will not be seen today. It will be broadcast tomorrow in the regular time period.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Really happy to welcome Steve Lieber back to Word Balloon. Steve, is this our first video interview?
I think so.
I think so too, man. I only started doing video during COVID, and shame on me waiting for so long to have you on video and everything. But it's great to see you, man. How you been?
Doing terrific. Thanks for asking.
Dude, I was so bummed. I had Al Ewing on a week or two ago. And man, I'm sorry that they decided to wrap up Metamorho only after 6 issues, dude.
We had the time of our lives doing it, and we got to do 6 issues without compromise, exactly the way we want. I can't ask for more than that.
I hear you. I absolutely hear you. But it was so great, and truly, both the writing and the art tone. You know, I mean, seriously, man, it's obviously, and we're going to talk about another book that I think has this style of art tone and the kind of ideas that you brought. But you were channeling Ramona Fradon, absolutely, man. And it was great.
Mean, yeah, I was 11 years old reading those DC Comics 100 pages for 60 cents collections, and just poring over that stuff and burning it into my brain. And I didn't realize it was job training. Here I am 40 years later.
Were you? Did you ever meet her?
Just to shake hands in passing.
Okay, because I bought a couple sketches from her over the years, and yeah, man, I have a Metamorho pencil sketch that I adore, and then also I have an Ollie Queen Green Arrow of like pre-beard, like 60s Green Arrow and late 50s Green Arrow, and ironically, not an Aquaman, but I have a Namor that she did on a 5x7 card.
Wow.
And oh man, and truly, she was. And we talked about possibly doing an interview, and it's just one of those regrets that I didn't get to it. And my God, what a wonderful woman! She was so cool.
Yeah, and I saw a great salty comment she made about quitting the daily strip.
Brenda Starr.
Yeah, and it was.
What'd she say?
It was. She was throwing the sort of elbows I would associate with a cartoonist in their 20s.
All right, there you go.
I'll see if I can find the
quote.
Yeah, I'll dig it out later on.
All right. Radio Dormouse says hey, and a nice comment from Mason. Thanks for joining us, Mason. He says Metamorho was a pleasant surprise. Didn't know the character, but loved the story and the art. Well, again, man, you guys, were really bringing that great Silver Age spirit to what you're doing. In fact, here I have this great splash page, and it's, I mean, come on, man. I mean, you're looking at those 100-page spectaculars or 12-cent reprints for this kind of inspiration. And there's our cast of characters right there. I loved it, man. Truly, it was great.
Yeah, and hats off particularly in that book to the letterer, who did a lot of extra work to make the stuff look and feel like a Silver Age book. It's all, everybody was telling the same story and working in the same direction. You don't often get a team like that.
Who was your letterer?
Ferran Delgado. He's from South America. I forget which country. If you're watching, Ferran, sorry about that. But boy, did he do a great job. You can see that none of those are like the usual Photoshop, Illustrator, generic balloons. Every one of them is hand drawn. The stuff is staggered the way it would have been in a hand lettered comic from 50 years ago. And it became part of the voice of the book.
So the graphic of the Metamorpho name and the bottom there as well, kind of was that his work as well?
I think the logo up at the top there, that I think might be the original logo.
Okay, because Irish Schnapp, of course, was the great, design guy for a lot of lettering and a lot of titles and things like that.
Yeah,
and again, I'm like, holy shit, man, this looks like a 12-cent comic. This is great.
Yeah, and the moment I saw that first script and I saw how Al was really pushing that authorial voice, where the narrator of the comic is almost a whole other character in the story. This slightly out of it hipster trying to be down with the kids, and
the way Bob Haney would write back in the day.
Exactly.
Man. Yeah. Oh yeah. I love. Did you ever read that last? There was a Teen Titans oversized one shot that it was like his last script.
Oh no.
I can't remember who drew it. It was like in the 2000s that they put it out, I guess kind of as a tribute to him. Mm-hmm. And it was this insane kind of story. And absolutely, him and, I was going to say the Brave and Bold writer, but that was him. I was thinking of Murray Boltinoff, but he was the editor and Bob was the writer. And yeah, man, the kids, they like miniskirts. All right. Yeah, great.
The hardest thing when talking about this stuff is to not sound patronizing, because I'm not at all. It's an authorial choice. As much as like when a singer who's never lived anywhere near the country sings a country song, this is a choice that you make as an artist, as a storyteller, to communicate the vibe that you want and then go with it. And I love that stuff.
That's great, man. That's excellent. So what was it like working with Al Ewing?
It was a delight, a real pleasure. His scripts are chatty and funny. He works really, really hard to make sure that everybody's on the same page with him, because so much of it depends on getting the tone right. It's not just about reporting the facts of the story that he's asking for. It's about doing the same kind of storytelling, making sure that the emphasis lands right. And he gave me everything I needed to tell his story. It's fascinating when trying to do humorous stuff. So much of it is about emphasis. If you make a moment too dramatic, or you oversell a gesture, if you go too pie-eyed on a person's reaction, it can kill the whole joke. But reading what Al wrote, it immediately put me in the vibe that he was going for. And, more often than not, the very first picture that I visualized when I was reading it was the right solution to the page.
That's excellent, man. The characters and everything. I mean, they're again, these Ramona Fradon designs are fantastic. But yeah, did you have what you guys did with Java? Simon Stagg's Major Domo and everything. Mm-hmm. And were you guys? I mean, Al wrote him a little more sophisticated than he initially was.
Yeah.
But that made the contrast of his ape-like look even crazier and everything.
Yeah, and there's a good place where reading Al's script really steered me in the right direction. When I first signed on to the project, he talked about Java being a little more sophisticated, a little less of just a flesh-colored Hulk, basically.
For real, yeah.
And so I was going to very different places. There's a Scandinavian illustrator named Tom Bjorklund, who's this magnificent painter who does paleo art, and he'll do portraits of Neanderthals or Homo habilis or something, and paint them like he was a 17th century painter in his salon with them sitting. and just with that, all that insight and all that dignity. So I was initially thinking, okay, I'm going to do him as a Neanderthal with genuine depth and dignity. But then I read the script. It's like, no, that's not this guy. I need a very different guy for this. And sure enough, it was I was going back to Ramona and just any number of other cavemen I've ever sketched in my life. Weirdly, the very first comic I ever got paid for was a caveman comic. It was I painted a comic for Chicago's Now Comics back in 1992 or something.
Go on, yeah.
And it was a caveman story. I came out of the Kubert School and I got hired to do a caveman story, and then a western, and then a war comic, and then Hawkman. So they kind of
that's great.
they knew my lane pretty quickly. So I had done all of this research on Neanderthals, and for the first thing I did was throw every bit of it out. This is something that exists in its own world, and I'm not going. And actual science has no value here whatsoever.
I don't know what it was like from a business standpoint working with Now, but I got to tell you, as a well, exactly, man. And the laugh might indicate the answer to my question, but I was going to say, what's crazy? I was working at a bank that Now Comics used for their accounts.
Oh, okay.
And that was my first understanding of who Alex Ross was, because all of these checks to them were coming in for Terminator: The Burning Earth. And it's like, oh, who is this guy and what's he doing? And every now and then they would call the bank for something, and I'd be on the phone with them. And I knew, their recognizable franchises like Speed Racer and the Green Hornet. And, I'm like, how's the Green Hornet doing over there? They're like, oh, hey, man, that's great. You're a reader. And I'm like, yes, I am. So that was fun. Do you remember the name of, was it an anthology comic that
it was Twilight Zone.
Oh, it's for Twilight Zone. Great.
Yeah. I got in there because they had bought a story pitch from a fellow I knew, a guy who owned a comic shop in Penn State where I'd gone to school. And he got in touch with me and asked me to help him do the breakdown so he could write a script that somebody could draw. So I was like his continuity assistant in helping him turn his story into drawable visual bits. And he pitched me as the artist for that story. And they had already hired, I think, Tony Harris for it, if I remember right.
Okay.
But they liked the samples I had sent, which included this. I had done this really dreary, grim painting of it was a Scent of Man image, but I had them go in the other direction.
The walking images that slowly become a modern man.
Yeah, well, I had to go in the other direction so that we're going back to lizards. And they saw that, and there was a pretty good caveman in there. So when they had this caveman story, they reached out to me, and it was a challenge collecting. I understand.
Well, that's why they're not around anymore, man.
I wound up using a trick that I learned from Timothy Truman in an old Comics Journal interview. I accepted another job from them after failing to collect for this first job. And this is back in the days when it mattered that a publisher missed a deadline. There were serious consequences for it. So I accepted this job. I penciled the whole other issue of Twilight Zone. I waited until the deadline. I faxed them or FedExed them a set of Xeroxes with do not reproduce written in a big red marker over every single page, and said, book's all done. If you want to see these pages alive again, pay me. And I had been supporting myself by working at a telemarketing firm shortly before then. And one of the things they had taught us was that you write down every possible objection that a potential customer could have and have a snappy answer ready for them. And so I did that with this negotiation. I had every possible thing written on a note card, and it worked out like a dream, man. It was like preparing for a Rocky fight or something. He said, "Well, this is very unprofessional of you," and I got to say, "Well, a professional is someone who gets paid for what they do," and and eventually just warmed out and got paid. And that was the end of my association with the company. But it was a good and valuable lesson in freelancing.
That's a great pro tip. And again, it is interesting that pro tips like that will come up in conversation. So that's fantastic, man. I good for you and good for Tim Truman for knowing that.
I spoke to Evan Dorkin later, and he said that he had to go through the same thing with him, and he just said that he was gonna send 4 punks into his house to kick in his windows.
Insane, man. I found, I think it was at like a bargain book thing, probably a remainder series of books where they had an oversized collection of their Green Hornet comics. And, I always I keep thinking about it, and shame on me for not doing it. Ron Frontier wrote a lot of those Green Hornet comics. Yeah. And they were good. And, another Chicago publisher, Moonstone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm buddies with Joe Gentile and Lori, the people behind Moonstone. And, they've had Ron. They've and you've likely have seen them. They will do a lot of licensed characters, but do short story collections of them, rather than the comics that they used to do. And so I know Ron's written some Green Hornet stories for them over the years and things. And also, do you know the artist Ruben Procopio?
I know the name. Was he a storyboard artist mostly?
He was, and also an animator, a Disney animator. I want to say he worked on Atlantis for Disney. Among other things, and Friends of Friends, and he was incredibly generous and gave me this beautiful pen and ink sketch of big, like I have it in a frame, of the Green Hornet and Kato. Cool. And it's truly one of my favorite pieces because, again, I mean, I was a big fan of that Van Williams Bruce Lee show. My God,
for whatever reason, it never made it onto any of our local affiliates when I was growing up in Pittsburgh. So I didn't see it until until it was long past its sell-by date. But it's fun and fascinating to see.
It is interesting because it's in some ways it's very, for people who haven't watched it, in some ways it's very similar to the '66 Batman show.
Yeah.
And of course they guest starred in that 2-parter on Batman as well.
Yeah,
but it was played straight. It was played like it's just a straight up action drama and everything. But it still had William Dozier, the producer, who was also, what will happen to Batman and the Joker? And so it's another exciting adventure of the Green Hornet. And it's like, oh, this is going to be fun. And in fact, I don't know if you ever were on the Around Comics podcast back in the day, mid 2000s, another Chicago show. Yeah. And we got into an argument because like, well, yeah, the Green Hornet was a comedy. I'm like, no, it wasn't. And they're like, and I'm like, you guys are just thinking of the 2-parter with Batman. And I'm like, no, man, I'm telling you, it was. And also, it had that great kind of Neil Hefti jazz soundtrack to it for the background music and everything. I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What are you gonna say, buddy?
With shows like that, it's amazing. I mean, the music really has to carry a lot of it because it's not like they had budgets for great set pieces or anything. So that atmosphere of drama and possibility, so much of that just comes from the right soundtrack.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Well, another great nod to the Silver Age that you were part of, you and Fraction doing the amazing Jimmy Olsen stuff. All right, there we go. Short eyeballs.
Cool.
Boom. So yeah, man. Is this the original trade?
Yeah. And I think I've got the new cover handy.
Oh, great! No, yeah, please put it on screen. I'll zoom in on it. We'll do full screen if you got it. And yeah, you could share it. You could share it if you're if you want, either if you've got it to hold up, but if you've got it on your computer, you could share the image and we can post it the way I've been posting these covers.
Cool. I think I'm doing this right.
Okay.
Boom.
Okay, stand by. Oh, excellent. Because Steve, I wanted to talk about this. Fantastic, man. And in fact, the other night, I think, we were doing a book club. Bendis and me and Tom King joined us, and we were talking about Criminal. And Brian asked, because everyone, if you don't know the inspiration for this is an homage from Lieber. to the great Superman versus Muhammad Ali cover of that oversized Treasury edition. And as you can see, there are recognizable faces within the crowd. And a lot of comic book characters in the crowd too. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah, there's 200 identifiable people in there, people/characters. 140 of them, give or take, are real people.
Grab off some names, Steve.
Oh, well, let's see. Going down the front row, we've got Matt Fraction, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Nathan Fairbairn, Clayton Cowles. Up there in the front between Batman and Lex Luthor, in the position originally occupied by Sonny Bono in the original comic. And I don't know if it's visible to your viewers, but I'm pointing to my signature.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great, man. I'm sure you've heard the stories as well, like that, and I know Kubert did the original cover.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen it. Yeah. It was framed in his office when I was there at his school.
Wow.
And so when if I had to go talk to him while I was waiting for him to finish what he was doing, I would just sit underneath it and stare at it.
That's outstanding. And I know a lot of people objected to being in the cover once, Warner Brothers and DC were kind of making the rounds to make sure that it would be okay. I know John Wayne complained, and so they slapped a mustache on his face.
Yeah, there's a lot of people on Neil's original cover where you could see a very clear Henry Winkler and
the guys from Welcome Back, Kotter are there. The Sweat Hogs.
Yeah, they actually saw it. I guess it probably helped that DC had to deal with them to do a comic.
That's right, Mark Evanier's Welcome Back, Kotter comic. Sure.
But yeah, there's a whole bunch of people in there where their silhouette on the map is unidentified, but if you look, you can tell exactly who it is. The Beatles are on there really, really tiny, not on mine, on his. And they're not identified, but if you look between two of the ropes, you can see them. I probably spent 50 hours as a kid in 1978 poring over that thing. Yeah, with a jeweler's loop in my eye, just carefully investigating it.
That's great.
And so when it came time to do this, well, originally, Fraction and I had joked about this. We had a Superman versus Muhammad Ali influenced chapter in the Jimmy Olsen series originally, where they meet Hunya, and we had talked about wanting to do a tribute cover for the main thing. And my initial idea is one that it's probably good that DC said no. I had wanted to just draw the same people who were in the original cover, but as they look now.
Oh Jesus!
And then if they were dead, just draw an empty chair there, which it would have. It would have made it a lot easier for legal. Certainly, there's a whole lot less contracts to get signed.
That's awesome.
But they looked at me. They gave me that pitiable, please, Steve, grow up look. And
don't do that, please. Don't.
Yeah, and so it just became this joke that he and I would bag around once in a while. Then 5 years later, when it came time to do this big hardback, we said, well, let's actually do it. It started off, in figuring out who was going to go in there. I started off thinking that this is going to be my Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band cover.
Sure.
And then over time, as I started putting people who were important to me in there and just filling it, it kind of became the big concert at the end of All That Jazz, where everybody who knows Bob Fosse's character is everybody he ever knew in his whole life is there in the stands watching him. And, yeah.
That's awesome, man. No, honestly, this is so great. So is that Sarah in the hat next to Luthor?
Oh, no. That's Miss Tessmacher as she appears in the comic. Actually, in the loop. And the Luthor and Tessmacher spot in the original comic was occupied by Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, and I didn't want to put current president in that spot, so I thought Lex Luthor was a good sub in.
Yeah. same maniacal motivations.
Yeah, same vibe.
I keep wanting to do a parody and be like, I just got off the phone with Lex Luthor, excellent man. Victor Von Doom, one of my favorite world leaders. All that beat. And I actually do a better Trump than I'm doing right now. But,
sounded good to me. There's all throughout the cover. There's lots of there's Easter eggs for the series, and there's also lots of jokes that are only legible if you were to lay the original Neil Adams cover over this and compare who's in one space to another. It was 10 days of continuous work and just constantly sending screen caps to Fraction and asking, what do you think of this? Is it a good comparison if we put this person where this person used to be? And I'm not known, like, I always had a big problem getting likenesses, so setting out to do this was my way of forcing myself to learn. I figured, once I've done 140 likenesses, I'll be better at it. Frankly, there would be more, but as my editor in DC's legal department looked and saw the list growing and growing, there's literally 140 likeness release contracts that they had to get individually signed.
Yeah, thanks. Exactly. Thanks.
Yeah, none of them are getting paid extra for this. I'm just guaranteeing that no one gets to have a hot dinner for the next month.
That is so fantastic, man.
Yeah.
So wait, all right. Matt and Kelly Sue are right there in the front.
Right in the front, yeah.
And who's that? Who's the bald guy with the 5 o'clock shadow that's right there?
Directly next to him?
Yeah.
That is the color artist, the guy who had to color every single one of these people, Nathan Fairbairn.
Okay, yeah.
And he's wearing the T-shirt of his creator-owned book. Next to him is the letterer, Clayton Cowles.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And is that Harley Quinn next to him?
That is a character named Jix, who's she's kind of this outer space princess who has a small but important role in the story. Next to her is Jimmy Olsen's landlord, who's also his lawyer. Ed Lynch, the landlord lawyer. Next to that is Dr. Mantle, who's named after the gun on the mantle. We kind of planned him early in the story, then fire him later on. Got next to him is, of course, Crypto.
Yeah, actually, James is asking what breed of dog do you think Crypto is when you draw Crypto?
Oh yeah, I just draw him as a white version of a lab.
Yeah, sure.
My friend Cheryl Lynn Eaton makes a really, really good case that he should be a bull terrier because they look like an alien's idea of what an Earth dog would look like.
Hilarious.
Go ahead, folks. Pull up a picture of a bull terrier, like from the movie Baxter. You'll see that's an alien's idea of a dog, and that would have worked great. But I grew up with Crypto who looked like this, so I decided to just put him in there.
You don't have to explain to me, Steve. Exactly. We grew up with the same kind of Crypto. Did I already ask you? Because again, I'm getting senile. Who's the redhead next to Metamorpho? Above Nathan?
That is the original editor for the book, Jessica Chen, who fought for us like crazy in there, made sure that all of our rude gags would get through, and we in the course of doing this book, we did remarkable violence to some very valuable intellectual property, and it was Jessica's intensity as an editor that made it possible for us to do that. She's been drawn by several people. I know the artist who draws Nightwing has put her into a bunch of panels as well. She's sort of a superhero herself. Another important person in between Metamorpho and Red Tornado, just behind Jessica.
Yeah.
The guy with the brown hair and the glasses. Mm-hmm. That is Tom Rogers, who's my assistant. Tom is a fantastic cartoonist himself, and he did tons of work on backgrounds throughout Jimmy, and also on Metamorpho and on the Red Tornado book that we did a couple of years ago. So I wanted him right up front.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Who? And I see Hawkman obviously back
yeah.
there as well, and that's a
Yeah.
callback to your work on Hawkman, I would assume. Who
Yep.
was writing Hawkman when you were doing it?
That was William Messner Loebs.
Oh man! Oh, that is so great. I had the pleasure of meeting him at the Eisners one year.
Oh, that's excellent.
And man, you know, those Flash stories from the '80s. God damn, what a great writer.
Yeah. Oh, I was thrilled to get to work with Bill. I've been a fan of his since the first issue of Journey, and that's one that I still point people towards. That it's thought of as this thoughtful indie comic, but that first issue is a 22-page chase scene with the guy just hauling ass trying to get away from a rabid bear, and Bill drew the hell out of that comic. It was wonderful. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, and he was really, really good to work with too. You know, I was a completely inexperienced noob, and Bill had already had a claim and years of work behind him.
Sure.
And he just treated me like a collaborator. There was no
Okay,
totem pole or anything like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Jesus, man, that's amazing. You know, that I had a blind spot in the early '90s, man. I was too poor. I was coming out of college and, you know, barely could afford the apartment I was living in, let alone extra comics and stuff. So really, I didn't come back to comics till like the late '90s. I'd come back for things like Kingdom Come and Marvels, mentioning Alex Ross, but you know, again, you can't, that kind of art, my God, you know, it begged to be bought. So I'm like, all right, I'm in for those things. What kind of did you get pushback from editorial for a lot of the gags you and Matt wanted to do for Jimmy?
Jess protected us from a lot of it. I know there was there was objections, and are we sure about this and stuff like that. But for the most part, it didn't reach us. You know, she did that important editor's job of making sure that we were just free to make the best comic we could. And I think it helped that there were fans of what we were doing in the office, and that's the greatest superpower a creator can have, is somebody in the office who actually likes your stuff.
No, that's beautiful, man. Absolutely. You know, protecting you guys. I think that's great. Interesting question from James Bunn. Is Jimmy still Jimmy without a bow tie? Sure he is, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the classic look, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah. We got a lot of mileage out of that bow tie. You know, we opened the book with him naked except for the bow tie. The very first shot you see of him is him waking up in a abandoned gorilla city with that alien princess character we mentioned earlier, and Jimmy's got a bow tie, and he has to very quickly cover himself with a bouquet of roses.
That's fantastic. I forgot about that. That's great, man. 12 issues, right, in the oversized collection?
More than that, actually. There's the 12 issues of the original series. There was an intro story that appeared in Bendis's Leviathan book. It's not just an intro; it's crucial to the whole story. So we open with that. And then there's also an 8-page story that appeared in another Superman book, and a 7-page Perry White story that appeared in another book. A couple of 1-pagers, and then something like 30 or 40 pages of extras in the back.
Wow.
2 whole essays written by Fraction, dozens of unused sketches and rejected cover ideas, and gags that I've just been sitting on all this time because we didn't get to use them. It's jammed with material. They really went all out and gave us everything we asked for.
I loved the format of the book too, that you guys would do little six page, or even, you tell me the page count, the chapters, because a lot of times there were like, even in a 12-cent comic, there'd be maybe 3, a lead story of maybe 17 pages and then 2 6 or 8 page backups and things like that.
Yeah, and that was Fraction's structural idea from the start. He really liked the idea that Jimmy was this anthology of insane stories, any of which should have been the most insane story in a character's life, but that they never affected each other. And he thought, well, okay, let's take that format. First, people read it, they'll think it's just this anthology collection of bizarre stories, and then as you've read 4 or 5 of them, you start to see that the stories are weaving into each other and connecting. And then you
Yes.
realize that it is actually a linear story. It's just being told out of order.
Yes.
And leaving it for the reader to assemble all that and put it together. I thought it was just a great solution for getting that vibe, and also it kind of it takes advantage of the old Monty Python strategy of when the idea has run out, get on to the next bit.
Yep.
We don't have a giant foot dropping down, but it's the same thing. All killer, no filler. Here's an interesting idea. This is a 3-page idea. We're going to give it as a 3-page story and then get on to the next one. And it means the book is really energetic, and that. But we had to kind of train readers how to read it, so they wouldn't think that it was just skipping all over the place without purpose. And I think having it all under one set of covers makes it a whole lot easier to understand, to see what we were doing.
Actually, I wanted to do this other quote from Michael, and not for something completely bow tie. Absolutely.
Very good. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Even Sid's on the same wavelength as Michael is. That's fantastic, man. So, no, great stuff. And all right, now, we've had Turtle Man Jimmy. We've had Porcupine Man. We've had the Wolfman comic. Do you have a favorite iteration of Crazy Jimmy that he went through in his career?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I will regret till the end of my days that when I met Kurt Schaffenberger and bought some original art from him, I did not get any of the Drag Jimmy pages that he had.
I remember those stories. Jesus, man. Yeah, Jimmy's, and I'd say this with very comfortable in my sexuality. Jimmy's kind of cute as a girl.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I felt like, and I had a page in my hand, but there was also a Marvel Family page that I really liked, and they were wildly underpriced. But I was a broke artist in the mid '90s, and okay, I can afford one of these. I'll get the one.
One of my favorite Silver Age artists, and I loved, of course, when they stopped doing, as you well know, the solo Jimmy and Lois books, they put them on those dollar Superman family books of the late 70s and early 80s. Mm-hmm. Schaffenberger was drawing the Earth 2 Golden Age Superman, Mr. and Mrs. Superman, well before Lois and Clark and Superman and Lois as far as modern iterations. But I and of course he was like kind of the Hallmark 2 Lois artist as well. And did Schaffenberger? Because I also, and maybe I was misremembering, but I was always thinking of Kurt Swan also drawing a lot of Jimmy issues. In your research, tell me who else drew Jimmy back then.
They both did quite a bit. I mean, they published a lot of those comics. It's crazy how long that run went.
Because Jack Larson was so popular on the TV show. That's why both of those books were created, because of the success of the TV show.
Yeah, and it's still remarkable to look at them and see what deeply bizarre material this was. It drawn by wonderful graphic artists and told by skilled weirdos, and
well, just again, it was, and really, there are episodes of the George Reeves show where they time travel, and so Lois and Jimmy are in bearskins and everything and running around, and yeah, I mean, God, the morbid story, sadly, after George died,
of course,
that they wanted to continue the show and put the focus on Jimmy. and they went to Jack Larson and said, no, you don't understand. What we're going to do is we're going to use old footage of George, and that way we can rewrite scenes around those and make new episodes. And to his credit, Jack Larson's like, that's the most morbid thing I have ever heard. Absolutely not. You don't have me.
Yeah.
And so Marty Pascoe told me that because he knew that story from back then.
Holy cow!
Isn't that crazy, man? Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So the Superman celebration is coming up in a week or so down in Metropolis, Illinois. God, Steve, you'd be great to go down there too, man, and tell Jimmy stories and everything.
I should reach out and see if they have me next year. There was a great Jimmy Olsen cosplayer when I was working on the book who had a bunch of photos, and it looked wonderful. He was there posing with like 30 different people doing Superman, and just note perfect.
That's cool. I'm looking at a couple comments from Mason. Mason says Jimmy Olsen was a phenomenal series, but I only picked it up because of Steve's work on Superior Foes of Spider-Man. And then he follows up and says, with the Marvel and DC crossovers coming up, let's get a Jimmy Superior Foes crossover.
I would love to do one of those crossovers. And I don't know what it would be. I don't know what would happen, but they have my number. And
remind me was it Nick Spencer that wrote the Superior Foes series?
Yep. Yeah.
There we go. Man, my brain's working every now and then. That's
very
cool.
good.
Put the pot down, John, and you'll remember these things better. So I understand. No, honestly, Steve, another wonderful hallmark of some of your work, and Nick too. And I miss Nick. I don't know the last time he wrote a comic, and and again, it's totally fine. But I've reached out through emails a few times, and he's never responded back because I'd love to talk to him. I don't know how much of the audience knows, but a lot of the comic creators that got Substack deals.
Yeah, he was their outreach guy.
Yep. And I think that's a really interesting story. And I'm like, I'd really like to talk to him about it. But yeah, I can't get him back. The last time I've had Nick on was when he was still active. And again, everybody, you'll forgive me for saying I think I was on the right side of this. When everyone was angry at Nick for writing Hydra Cap and Hail Hydra, I'm like, first of all, it's a story. Yeah. Second of all, do you really think that we're not going to get classic Steve Rogers at the end of this story? And I remember some very even professional, and again, I was about to be condescending and say, I guess they're professionals, but these like editorials, how dare you? Oh, you're robbing our childhood. And oh my God, Cap is such an important man to turn him into this. And it's like, it's a story, dumbasses, relax. Everything's fine.
I did not get where that was coming from. It was. I mean, maybe it's just because I've seen that set up so many times. Whoa, look, Batman's become a bad guy.
Yeah. Well, also those I don't know how many imaginary stories you had access to when you were growing up, but I had a great newsstand that had old back issues in the back. Wow. And yeah, man, I'd get. I wish I had hung on to them because I got a ton of those imaginary stories and stuff. God, one of my favorites where Lex wins and kills Superman.
Wow!
And to the point where Supergirl, who was still his secret weapon, it's before her identity was public, like crashes through wearing a Superman like costume and a whole setup to make her look like a man. And it's like, no, it's me. And you killed my cousin. Now you have to pay. And it was great because it ended with her flying and one of those great Silver Age images of like a ghost of Superman in the sky waving to Supergirl and stuff. I mean, man, come on, Silver Age classic kind of ideas, Yeah,
with all of the comics from that era, I had a decent newsstand, but they didn't have back issues or anything. And because my family was pretty broke, I wasn't allowed to buy new comics.
Okay.
I could sit at the newsstand and read them, or there was a store like the next neighborhood over that sold all the stripped books that were supposed to have been pulped. And so all the comics I owned until I was like 13 or 14 years old were coverless.
Yes. Because for people who don't know what we're talking about, the newsstands would send back the covers to recoup the money they laid out for, let's say, 20 comics. All right, 10 didn't sell. Here are the covers, proof that I still had them and stuff. And yeah, they would keep the actual coverless comics themselves and put them in a plastic bag and sell them for like $3 for a quarter or whatever.
Yeah, at the place I went to, they were a dime each or 12 for a buck.
Nice.
And yeah, so I could get a lot of comics. I couldn't get the covers, which were often the best part. But
sure, yeah.
But what that meant was I only got the stuff that didn't sell.
Yes.
And I could never get 2 issues in a row because it was just a random thing. But that was great training. You know, if you're a 9-year-old kid obsessed with these stories and you're only getting half of it, either the beginning and then it's to be continued and you'll never find out, or you're getting the end of the story and you don't know how it started, you spend a lot of time thinking about, well, what could have been in the part that I missed. And I'm sure that's part of the reason I became a cartoonist was just that practice in figuring out the stuff I didn't get to see.
Yeah, conceivable plot. Sure, I get it, man. No, and you're right about that. That's the only time I would read like Hellstrom or Hellstrom from Marvel,
Yeah.
or Where Monsters Dwell, which was a great reprint comic of their old Atlas monster stories pre-Marvel and stuff. And yeah, man, on the one hand, because you're right, it was weird. Like we only got like part 1 or part 2, so we never got the full story. But they were interesting, and it exposed us to all these other different titles that if they were complete,
totally,
we probably wouldn't have bought them. So yeah, I get it, man.
Yeah, and as a superhero obsessed kid, I probably wouldn't have bought a lot of the other genres that I got, but because of those bagged comics where it's 3 for a quarter and you didn't know what was in the middle, it could be anything. You know, it could be a Dennis the Menace, it could be Sad Sack.
I was gonna say Sad Sack, exactly. Yeah. Son of a bitch, I gotta do a goddamn Sad Sack. Yeah. I know, man. And that thing ran forever. I have yet to meet even old timers. I've never met a Sad Sack fan, and it's ridiculous. Oh, by the way, I made before the Federal Trade Commission is really cracking down on, or was in the previous administration, fake videos, and I had this Ted Cruz video of him denouncing Word Balloon, and it was for my 19th year, and he said, 19 years of coverage, and you've never done a story about Sad Sack. I base all my military decisions on that comic book. And I'm like, yeah, of course you do. And again, I'm putting words in Ted Cruz's mouth. But yeah, that's the only time I've ever had Sad Sack in context. And also, did you know there was a Jerry Lewis Sad Sack movie?
No. Oh my God.
Yes, there is.
Really?
And and it's been a while. I haven't, because a lot of times old movies are on YouTube and they yank them down. And I think it's probably one of those orphan movies, and rightfully so. But yeah, it's kind of this. It's after he split from Dean Martin. And yeah, it's The Sad Sack starring Jerry Lewis. And it's like, wow, it's early, it's pre-Nutty Professor. It's, like I said, it's in that weird period right after he left Dean. And they even made an adaptation of this great Gore Vidal play called Visit to a Small Planet. And he's the alien in it. And again, it's this bizarre little weird late 50s, early 60s movie. And yeah, I mean, it's almost like a precursor of Mork and Mindy. I mean, he's not as wild as Robin Williams was, and he's still doing like kind of the spastic kid. Forgive me, everybody. I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but yeah, it's crazy and everything. And that Sad Sack movie is another weird thing like that. So yeah.
Jeez, that's.
I know. What can you say after that? I hear you, man. Jeez, but yeah, Sad Sack, just an ugly, ugly comic.
Yeah.
Beetle Bailey was much sweeter in design and more Walker's humor.
Yeah, and Walker's actually funny.
Exactly.
Although a lot of these things, looking at them now, they're the weird comedy vacuum that they create is funny in and of itself. That's kind of a humor theorist say the darndest things sort of situation. But sometimes something that's kind of funny isn't nearly as funny as something that isn't funny at all.
Yes. Yeah, we're laughing at it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree with you. My favorite Moore Walker story, the censors would get mad. Of course, Colonel Halftrack had as a very attractive secretary who was named Miss Buxley, everybody.
Yes.
And every now and then, Mort Walker would put Miss Buxley in a bikini on the beach or whatever, or even walking around the base, in a bikini. And the censors at the newspaper syndicate would take an X-Acto knife and cut out all the navels, kind of like Barbara Eden's problem on I Dream of Jeannie.
Wow.
So as a FU revenge thing, at least in one comic strip, he had a crate of oranges in Colonel Halftrack's office, and they were navel oranges, and there were pictures on the box of women in bikinis with their navels and stuff. Now go to town on this. And it was so fantastic. Yeah, that's why, I mean, Mort Walker made one appearance before he passed away at a New York Comic-Con.
Wow.
I wasn't able to go to the panel, and to this day, it's like, oh, I would have loved to have heard Mort Walker stories. My God, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So, too goddamn funny, man.
I put a couple of
oh, yes. Oh, excellent. Hold on. All right, I'll switch to one of these. Let's see here.
So
there you go.
So there you can. That's a panel from the Jimmy Olsen comic. When we did Jimmy's childhood, we treated it as this kind of hybrid of Hank Ketchum and Al Wiseman and Charles Schultz and Jaime Hernandez. And yeah, that's a place where those Dennis the Menace comics from the center of the bags really came in handy.
Do you still have some of those coverless comics?
Yeah.
Oh, Steve, that is so great, man.
In fact,
that is fantastic. Oh, you got one? I'll zoom in.
I can pull the whole box down. Here we go.
I don't want you to pull down a bookcase or anything like that while you're doing it. I zoomed in.
Got
nice.
Lieber's childhood treasures right there.
Beautiful, man. That's fantastic. Oh, I love that.
See, here we have. This is.
Wait, stand by. Zooming in. Boom.
That is X-Men Special #1, the one that introduced the new X-Men.
Wow!
If this had a cover on it, it'd be worth quite a bit of money. But
the first giant size X-Men.
Giant size X-Men. That was
Yeah.
And,
holy shit!
But
that's
instead,
fantastic.
it's just from out from under my bed as a 10-year-old and read to pieces.
Oh, it's got the back. Wait, it's got the back cover with there you go, man. Oh my God, everybody.
Prizes.
Yeah, we cannot tell you how many comics we had back in the day that was the back cover. So I get it. That selling burpee seeds, and remember the Johnson, the novelty company Johnson, and it would have like black soap or hey, you can get a pillow with Raquel Welch's photo on it.
There
it's
it is.
Sure, great. Oh, dude, those are great. Every now and then, one of the local comic shops by me, stand by, zooming in again because I love these things, will sell these comics. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So one of the Joker issues, right?
Yeah. And this was weird and fascinating that there were these incredibly dark stories that with weird Joker comedy running through them. And I wasn't quite sure how I was supposed to be reading these. Am I supposed to be entertained that he just murdered all these people, or am I horrified, or what?
No, I hear you, man. Yeah, Mike, you're right. Slightly less giant X-Men. But Michael, is Michael right? Is that Irv Novak art on the
Yes,
Joker
it is.
stuff?
And inked by one of my teachers, Tex Blaisdell. There, if you go back to that, I'm clicking on a link. I can do it.
Sure.
To the double page, or to the big double page cover.
Yeah. You got Irv in there, or you got Tex in there?
Yeah. Officially, no. I probably should admit this.
Yeah, of course not. No, never. This is not at all who we're talking about. No. But if you look next to the Spectre, way up in the nosebleeds, there's a guy who looks an awful lot like Tex, who's sitting in the same seat that Tex was sitting in the Neil Adams cover in 1978. Wow.
But in the map, he's identified as Lucien the Librarian, who's a DC Comics character that was based on Tex.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Lucien, was he in the House of Mystery or House of Secret books?
Yeah, he was one of their horror hosts who later got turned into one of the Sandman characters.
Yes, of course, absolutely. Yeah.
Tex
Michael
was.
Okay. Go ahead. No, tell me about Tex, please.
Tex was an amazing teacher at the Joe Kubert School. He had been in comics since before World War II. Was 6'5",
wow.
with a head shaped like a giant light bulb, and smoked unfiltered Luckies that he stuck into like an aluminum cigarette holder.
Fantastic.
And he would he lived in our dorm 2 days a week, and would just sit at the kitchen table with a drawing board, smoking these Luckies and telling us battle stories from the beginnings of time. Um, yeah, but Billy Eisner got into the army, and he was a cartoonist in the army, and I got into the army. I got in there, and I was flying in the back of bombers. I don't know what the hell happened.
Wow. Wow, I didn't know that about Tex. That's amazing.
Yeah, and we tried to get stories out of him, and said, "So, Tex, did you join the Mile High Club?" And, well, I tried, but it gets cold up there.
I have one Superman original page from the 70s. I found it on eBay, and I gifted it to myself because it was a Kurt Swan, Tex Blazel inked Lois and Clark page. They're in
great.
Washington, D.C., and God, I wish I had a scanner because I would totally show it on the show and everything, but I don't have a scanner right now. And they're in the Capitol building.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew this because a good friend of mine, and this is pre 9/11 and all the security. God, certainly the attack on the Capitol. I'm sure it's even more impossible. Yeah. But you could go down to the commissary where the congressmen and the senators would eat, and they were kind of famous for this white navy bean soup.
Sure.
And it kind of was like a signature item on the cafeteria menu. Mm-hmm. And my buddy's like, we gotta have this. He goes, this, if you really want to experience. Well, and it was great too, because we met Senator John Glenn, who of course, great astronaut and great senator from Ohio, former presidential candidate. He was terrific. I mean, I shook hands with a Mercury astronaut. Are you kidding me? That was amazing. Yeah. But in that page, there's only one panel, and it's not even a real Superman panel. One of the villains is looking at like a radar scope, and it's an outline of Superman in that panel. But otherwise, it's totally this Lois and Clark scene in the Capitol, and they're talking about the navy bean soup. So that's it. But it was so, and of course, when I was looking, I'm like, initially, I'm like, oh, it's a shame it's not Murphy Anderson, or give me another guy. But no, Tex. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a fantastic page, man.
Yeah, and I adored Tex. He was warm and funny and a great storyteller. And to us, he was like this John Huston figure. And he also told me one of the best stories about freelancing I ever heard. And I'll pass this along because the wisdom is still valuable today. A buddy of his was drawing the Popeye newspaper strip and got sick. And so Tex told his editor at the syndicate, well, while he's recovering, I can take over it for you. I know how to draw those characters. So he turned in his roughs and got his roughs approved. And then a couple days later, he came in with fully inked pages. And they said, how did you do this so fast? That's fantastic. And he said, well, like I said, I know the characters. So all I had to do was just put the roughs into my artograph and project them onto the board, and I could just draw them straight in ink. And they said, oh, that's terrific. Uh-oh. We're not going to pay you for penciling.
Motherfucker. God damn.
And so he lost half the money that he thought he was due for the job, because he told them that he had found a shortcut.
Lesson learned. Yeah.
Yeah. And I follow that to this day. Never let a client know that something was easy.
I respect that. That's so funny. That was such a rookie mistake on my part, I think, in the early days of Word Villain, where I'd be like, all right, that's a monthly deadline. So how long does it really take you to draw? And it's like, oh no, it takes a month or whatever. And God bless them if they were telling the truth, or because obviously we know artists that it does take them longer than a month to produce a full book, a 20-page book or whatever. And also the, Jack Kirby school of, I can do 8 books in a month, if you really need me to or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, they don't pay to erase.
Interesting. No, that's great. Yeah, you're right. Here, all right. Now another image that you've got, and we can talk about that. Let's see. So there you go, man.
That was our very first appearance of Jimmy in the book. Yeah, and we're planting a bunch of stuff that appears throughout the whole series. There's the coffee table book of Jimmy's photography. Um, the painting on the wall behind them is actually me swiping Toulouse-Lautrec, but
Fantastic.
but with gorillas. You know, like when I got the script from Fraction, he said it's the honeymoon suite at the Sheraton in Gorilla City. What's that going to look like? You know?
Solivar approved, everybody.
Yeah, and that's how Fraction's brain works. Of course, there's if it's a city, they've got hotels, they've got
Of course, yeah. Absolutely.
He was doing a bookstore signing in Gorilla City, which is why he was there.
You can only get banana pudding or banana bread at the restaurant for dessert.
And
unfortunately,
to let you know how good he is at what he does, when I was doing the bookstore, I realized I had an empty space in my composition where I could put the name of the store. And I texted him, Matt, I need a gorilla pun for the name of a bookstore. And he just immediately, like, there's no delay. He just wrote back, Ook Store. And I was like, oh, there it is.
Matt was in Bloomington, Illinois as a kid, because he's younger than me.
Oh, that's right.
When I was in college. And we literally only a couple of years ago, and I had no idea. And also Matt spent time in Chicago proper.
Yeah.
And it was so great because when I was working in sports radio, I was the comedy guy. So I did comedy parody songs, and would do sketches and do different voices and things. And I was having lunch with Matt and Rick Remender at Seattle, Emerald City one year. And we went to a restaurant off the convention and everything. We were eating. And they're like, yeah, so what you do in radio? And I'm like, oh, I did X, I did Y, all these things. I'm like, when Mike Ditka left the Bears and went to coach for the New Orleans Saints, I said, I wrote this parody song to Johnny Rivers' song, The Battle of New Orleans. In 1814, we took a little trip. And Matt's eyes got wide. And he's like, I remember listening to that. And I was so delighted. I'm like, oh, Matt, I wrote something that you found funny. That's fantastic. I'm like, what are the odds? But this store down in Bloomington, the name of the store was Dreamth. So it's the word dream and then put a TH at the end of it. I'm not pronouncing poorly, everybody. It literally is this weird word that doesn't really exist. And literally, and this guy who ran it was a young guy. He was older than college age, but maybe 30s or whatever. He had false teeth. He always wore a Stetson cowboy hat. And he had this weird, almost kind of lecherous like stare that he, kind of on his face. And we'd be like, to my friends, we all called him Lloyd, the psychedelic cowboy, and everything. And it's like, all right, whatever. But I don't know how it happened. But Matt and I are talking, and it's like, hey, you were in Bloomington when I was there. And it was me or him. And he's like, do you remember a store called Dreamth? I'm like, Lloyd, the psycho cowboy. And literally now when we say, because Matt's birthday and I are one day apart. He's the January or December 1st. I'm December 2nd. So I always, hey, happy birthday, Matt. And he'll just write back, Dream. And I mean, I'm like, Matt, it is so insane. We were literally buying our comics at the same store. And, he was a kid. He was, like 12 years old or whatever, and I love that. And really, like, he's like, Bendis, you will not believe, like, Suntress and I did this. And and so I love that about Matt. I got to talk to him with his Batman run coming up.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about Backflash.
Backflash is a story I did with Matt Johnson, who's a novelist and comics writer. I had a huge, that I really, really, I had a story crush on him. I don't know what else to say. I loved his novels. And I wanted to do a comic with him because he hadn't really, his novels are incredibly funny. They're weighty and there's real story there, but he's also just a really funny guy. And he hadn't had a chance to do that in his comics. And I wanted to be the guy who could do funny with him.
Sure.
And so we did this book, Backflash, for Karen Berger's line at Dark Horse. That's my cat there helping me open the box. Yeah.
Very nice.
And that was a real pleasure right there. I've been a fan of Karen Berger as an editor, since before I knew what editors did. Swamp Thing is one of the reasons I became a comic book artist. The run that she edited, and when they reached out and asked about this, I jumped on it. It's yeah, it's I would say a proper science fiction story that it's a one gimme story. There's one thing that's different from the way the world works in the real world, which is that there are some people who can you can use objects to travel mentally back in time and then explore the time that the object takes them to. So it's a book about memory, and it meant that I was drawing a lot of Philadelphia in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up in Pittsburgh in the 70s, so not
Sure.
that different, although Pittsburghers and Philadelphians will both tell you that's very, very wrong.
I've been to both. I hear you, man. Absolutely.
But yeah, I love the world he created with it, and I was intimidated. It's a story about a black family, and so I worked my butt off on the research. I hired a consultant to tell me, is this what this woman would wear to a funeral and stuff like that. All the stuff that movie people take for granted, but comics people don't have. The actor doesn't choose their clothing. The director gets to have opinions, but there's somebody who's an expert in what a setting would look like or what clothing would look like on every movie. And comics, that's all one guy's job. And I realized that it doesn't actually have to be that way. It's some money out of pocket, but you wind up with a better story because of it.
Gabe was telling me, Gabe Hardman, everybody, that 20th Century Fox had the best art department with a photo library reference, so that if, hey, we're making a movie in the 30s, well, that's great because this is what they used to create the art design for that movie in the 30s. And they kept everything. And sadly, when 20th Century was absorbed by Disney, they got rid of it all.
No.
Steve, exactly, man. I see the look on your face. Yeah, man.
The Library of Alexandria.
What's that?
It's the Library of Alexandria.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I mean, my God. And truly, and again, Gabe, another great artist and also a storyboarder guy. So I can't believe that. And I know guys like Trevor Goring and Warren Simonson. Not Warren Simonson. Damn it, Warren. I apologize. I'm forgetting your last name right now. Again, now this is where the marijuana is kicking in and the brain doesn't work. But Warren Drummond, thank God.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Warren, if you're watching this or listening to this. I apologize, dude. But all three of them great Hollywood storyboard artists, as well as occasional comic book artists as well, in the case of Warren and Trevor. But yeah, that's so sad. And yeah, man, it's important. Well, God, I know the old timers and stuff would have those amazing photo file references prior to the internet, comic book artists and stuff.
Yeah.
And, I talked about like that with Gene Colan. I remember having a great conversation about his files that he had from decades of doing comics and stuff.
Yeah. Back to Tex Blaisdell. Tex was retiring while I was at the Kubert School and just decluttering the house. So he gave me his reference files.
Wow.
Yeah. It was, 6 or 7 banker's boxes full of carefully organized photos clipped from Life magazine and the Saturday Evening Post and everything from the 40s through the late 60s.
Wow.
And
I can only imagine, man. That's great.
It's priceless and it doesn't smell good, but it's a lot of newsprint that made it through summers in Connecticut. But
does it smell different than old comic books? The way that they smell?
It's closer to pulp magazines. If you could conjure up that difference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I got it. I only have 1 or 2 original 40s pulp magazines, but I got them and stuff. It's great. I was at a pulp magazine vintage show, and good Lord, this is literally 20 years ago, and Jerry Conway was in town and thumbing through the stuff too. And I had already had him on Word Balloon, and I'm like, "Hey man, what the hell are you doing here?" He goes, "Same thing you are, man." He goes, "Are you kidding?" He goes, "I love this stuff," and I do too. I love pulp magazines and everything, and especially a lot of those little individual illustrations that would be, on the pages and stuff, let alone the covers, of course, too.
Yeah.
But yeah. That's funny. Let's see. By the way, everyone, and I'm so sorry, everybody, I was missing all these great jokes about Gorilla City. Mike Jones says Gorilla City Tourist Board is a limited career path. And Mike says that people say they love Gorilla City, but I don't see it. Very good. Hey, did you ever, another Portland guy that I'd love to see you collaborate with in a comedy sense would be Mark Russell.
Oh, I've worked with Mark.
What did you guys do together?
We did a book called One Star Squadron.
Steve, mind blown. I totally forgot that you were the artist on that. I loved that book. And Mark and I talked about it. Tell me about doing One Star Squadron. Am I saying it right? It's a One Star Squadron?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was originally supposed to be All Star Squadron. But they decided they didn't want to come up with brand confusion. So we brainstormed names for a while. And because the book is about like an Uber for superheroes app program, Mark came up with One Star Squadron, and it's like, oh, there it is. That's the whole story. And
right,
the title
like real losers, heroes and stuff.
Yeah, all the guys with getting bad ratings on the app. Yeah, I loved it. That is a very funny and incredibly grim story. Mark is he's. I often say that the funniest guys aren't kidding. And boy, Mark looked at the world and said, "This is awful. This is bullshit. Let's do a story about it."
Yes.
And he was able to do it through the lens of superheroes, and I loved it. It was he built a whole world that with its own internal logic, and I picked up on it and wrote it together. I think I might have an image or two from
if you do, that'd be great, man. No, pop them in. That'd be terrific. I love his Ahoy work and his DC work and his Marvel work for that matter. And I love Zdarsky's like this as well, that I'm so glad that these guys who do great human books are getting the opportunity to do straight up, superhero stuff as well. And yeah, man, I mean, I want to say it was either Fantastic Four or Spider-Man life story. I think it was, I forget which, but I know Mark did that. And all the stuff he's been doing lately with Mike Allred.
Yeah.
Batman Dark Age and Superman Space Age. And I know they're working on a Wonder Woman Golden Age story as well. So yeah, that stuff is great. Oh, there you go. Oh, this is hilarious.
I had to create a lot of fake logos for businesses.
for the audio audience, it is a logo that looks like the Ape movies, but it's Planet of the Vapes, which is fantastic. Sadly, that is the society we're living in right now.
Yeah. That wound up in the background of a scene. Red Tornado is talking with Lex Luthor, who's the voice of capitalism in the story, and
sure,
Lex is making an argument that what's great about it is that it's the most efficient and best distribution of resources. And the whole time that they're having this conversation, there's a guy in an ape suit waving one of the signs back and forth for Planet of the Vapes.
Hey man, some smart retailer needs to pick up on this, because that's a brilliant idea for a.
I'm not going to open a vape store, folks. So it's all yours if you want it. Yeah.
That's great, man. Dude, I am so sorry. Shame on me for not knowing that you were the artist on One Star Squadron. I love that book.
Yeah, we did a cover on there that I really liked. Unfortunately, that one had to get watered down. We did a sort of version of the classic Kevin Maguire shot of everybody looking up towards the camera.
Yes, the Justice League cover, everybody, that Kevin is so well known for.
But instead of packing them all together like they're a team, they're all sort of isolated from each other, and they're looking at this rain of crumpled $1 bills that's falling on them.
I kind of remember this going on. Yeah. So how'd you have to water it down? Tell me.
I had very, very carefully photographed a huge array of crumpled $1 bills and arranged it so I could draw them all accurately. But an accurate drawing of U.S. currency is not legal.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, you're a counterfeiter now, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they we had to just keep luring them
Sure.
and making the money that emerald green that money actually isn't, and all that stuff.
How many issues was that
It was
series?
just a 6-issue series.
Okay. Did they ever trade it, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay, man. All right, everybody, go jump on Amazon, find that goddamn book because it's funny as hell. Yeah. Jesus. Oh man. Because like I said, I do it. Steve, I'm kicking myself because I talked to Mark about the book and everything. And that's my problem, Steve, honestly. And I really always appreciate when artists come on and I get to talk to them more. And
you talk to a lot of folks, man. There's a lot of people to keep track of.
Yeah, but again, I understand, and I appreciate you understanding that. But that said, there almost was kind of a self-conscious worry on my part because I was a news writer, a journalist, magazine writer of sports and things, along with my broadcast career. And I'm just like, I don't have the vocabulary to talk to artists. That was my initial concern. You don't need the vocabulary. That's what you guys are there for, to provide this information and stuff. So I've finally figured that out, and I can, do that. Oh, thanks, man. All right, excellent, everybody. All right, here's the aforementioned cover that he was talking about.
So you can see I had
Power Girls in the book too, everybody.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's great. And then, of course, Mark went on and he had his crazy superheroes, like the Chandelier Man or whatever, had the lampshade mask and everything.
I love those books. Yeah, the whole Ahoy line is really good. Yeah, one of these days I need to do some actual stories for them.
Very cool. That's crazy, man. God, this is great, Mark. My God, we're going in. Are you like okay for time, or should you go? I mean, I don't want to.
I can keep
going.
All
right, I don't want to mess up dinner time with you guys.
I had a sandwich before we talked. So.
All right, very good.
I'll be here for hours.
But no, because I obviously a couple of things we started talking about before we went on the air, and I wanted to acknowledge your book with Jeff Parker, Underground.
Yep.
And now was that for Oni? Who was that for?
It was originally Image.
Okay.
And then Oni made us an offer to reprint it, and we printed it there. And we've taken the rights back, and we're not sure where it's going to wind up now. That was a really cool project, and that was one that I initially thought I was going to write myself. I had been reading Tim Cahill, who's an adventure, like real life adventures journalist.
Yes.
And he wrote some great stuff about spelunkers and caving. And one of his pieces had this paragraph that was just him ticking off all the horrible ways that cavers had died in the previous year. And I read that list and I thought, well, that's a pretty good list of set pieces right there. And I thought, well, okay, I should maybe think about doing a story set in a cave. So I just started working on a story, and I was researching cave exploration, spelunking, which is a word that they actually don't like to use. And I was reading about the history of it and how it's done and the material. And if you're going to do a cave story set in the U.S., it pretty much has to be either in Kentucky or New Mexico, because that's where the really impressive caves are.
Okay.
So I picked Kentucky, and I started trying to write it, and I realized that I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I have no business trying to write Kentucky. I was, everything I was doing was stereotypes and received ideas, and I was writing bullshit. And so I started asking Parker, who grew up about 45 minutes from the Kentucky state line in North Carolina. And I would ask him more questions, and I would tell him more stuff about caving and getting him more interested in the subject. And I just sort of lured him into writing it without him being aware. He'll say that I totally tricked him into being the writer on the project. And it worked out great. I had already acquired a dozen books on the subject, so I was able to feed him all the research, and he knew the people and had the voices really well. and we put together a story. It was a 5-issue series that got collected into a GN. One of the things that I liked about it was it sort of functioned like a horror story, but with no supernatural menace. It was just a really scary environment and difficult situations to put the characters in. I wanted to see if I could put claustrophobia on the page.
Yes.
And we did a scene there that it was in the 3rd or 4th issue, and I forget. Is it okay to swear on this?
Of course you can. Absolutely you can.
It fucked me up drawing this because it was such a dark, terrible scenario. Yeah.
Wow.
As Jeff
you would
wrote
think, though, but as you drawing it, that you would be immune to that. Clearly not.
I had to conjure up what the environment, what it was like. So the scenario was this: our two heroes, this boy and girl ranger pair, park ranger pair, are moving through this cave trying to escape gunmen, and they wind up in a portion of the cave that's flooded, and the water is up to here, and the ceiling
up to his
is
chin.
right
Everybody,
here.
Because we're audio as well as video.
Oh, right.
Keep going.
Yeah, the water is up to their chin, and the ceiling is at their forehead.
Right.
So they're having to move through the cave with their head snapped back, just kind of hopping forward and kissing the ceiling.
Sure.
And with being completely unable to see where their next step is and if there's going to be a drop off.
Wow.
And meanwhile the walls of the cave are getting closer on them. And in researching this, I learned that cave diving is incredibly deadly. People die doing it all the time. And that's going in with proper breathing apparatus. But they move through the cave, and there's a rock that shifts, and suddenly they can't get their oxygen through, or they get stuck and they just run out of time, and the walls close in and they can't keep track. They lose track of where they are, and they just die horribly. And Parker wrote me a scene where that's the jeopardy, and it was I was sweating at the drawing board because I'm trying to project myself in that situation and feel what the characters are feeling, and it was rough.
That's wild. Here, Charlie remembers that story. He says it was very awesome to open that book and see that it was set in Kentucky. He lives in central Kentucky,
very good.
So that's cool. That's very cool. And by the way, here, Zach has a great comment about Superior Foes. He says he loved you and Nick doing that. It was the first time he ever really paid attention to Boomerang as a character. There you go. Sure.
Here's the first place I paid attention to Boomerang as a character. Stand by,
zooming in. I'll zoom in a second. Hold on a minute. And there we go. Boom. Nice.
I had that box of childhood treasures, and Boomerang was the villain in this great comic that Chris Claremont wrote in, what year was this? 1979.
I was going to get 78, close enough. Absolutely. Yeah. Who drew the cover and who drew the interiors? Does it say?
Let's see. I think the cover is Al Milgram, and the interiors are Sal Buscema and Steve Lealoa.
That was my guess, because I know Sal did a lot of those team up books and everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's awesome that it was Steve doing the coloring and everything.
Yeah, so
right? Was he doing the coloring or the inking?
The inking.
The inking. Excuse me.
Yeah,
that's great, man.
And that was a comic from my childhood right there. And then when I found out I was going to be doing a comedy version of Boomerang, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Although actually with Superior Foes, when I signed on for it, I didn't know it was a comedy. I thought it was going to be a ground level sort of book. It's about crooks, so it's
sure.
But it wasn't pitched as the sitcom it very quickly became. It was just Nick and I doing Second City comedy sports with each other as we worked on it, and yes-anding each other into a deeply goofy title.
As a Chicago, observer of sketch comedy, well done, well played. Yes, and indeed, one of the great comedy exercises that inspires a lot of great ideas when they're developing sketches, and even them improvising and just doing it on stage. That is fantastic, dude. Again, This is why it's like, Nick, God damn it, get off your ass and call me, and so we can do a new show for Christ's sake. And also, I'm so glad I still have Marvel Unlimited, because there's a fantastic book to go back and really admire your art and Nick's work and everything.
And alas, it's the only way to get it at this point, because
it was it never traded?
It was they made a really nice hardback, and Marvel did the thing that they do where they let it go out of print and never brought it back.
Yeah.
So,
there's a lot of great stories like that, sadly. So I understand.
Yeah, if you want to buy a hard copy, you could either buy the Japanese edition, which is still affordable for some reason.
Wow.
Or it's on eBay for 4 times cover price.
Isn't that crazy, man? I know. I
have a copy of it.
Yeah, you know what sucked? I had, and this is slightly off. Well, it's definitely off topic, although we mentioned him earlier in the show. I had a copy of Jerry Lewis's book, The Total Filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And for a temporary period, I was living with my sister between apartments, and she had a basement, and I had the book in a box, but the box wasn't airtight, and the mold destroyed this book. And I've looked on eBay and secondhand stores, and it's hundreds of dollars now.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, well, at least I read it, and but I mean, really, I wish I had it, because really, it's like a $500 book now and everything.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do?
It makes me crazy that the stuff's not available. And I tell people, you can get it from Marvel Unlimited, or you can steal it. Go ahead, folks.
Abby Hoffman stole this book.
Yeah,
absolutely, man. No, I get it. That's fantastic. What is Mario joining us? How you doing, Mario? Mario, I was bummed, man. You were going to be on the book club thing, and you left, and you never came back other than in the chat. Mario says that run of Marvel Team Up was an amazing thing. I wanted Peter and Natasha to end up together. Cool.
I've seen 2 parts of that story. Like I said earlier, that when I was a kid, I didn't get to read any continuous issues. And it was years later I read another part of it, and still have never put the whole run together.
That's hilarious. Well, again, that's why you need Marvel Unlimited and everything now. You're killing, man. All right, and also I obviously wanted to talk. My first awareness of Steve Lieber art, and really an early read of mine of Greg Rucka's, was of course Whiteout for Oni.
Very cool. That's Greg's first comic.
Well, there you go. I'd forgotten that. That's fantastic, because I always associate him with Denny O'Neil hiring him, or it was Denny before Bob. I told you last week I talked to Shrek, but and he was your guy's editor on Whiteout. But yeah, that I thought I always thought Denny had read Greg's novels, and that's why he hired him. But as I understand it too, Bob, of course, well, tell me how Whiteout happened for you.
For me, I was unaware that I was recruited for the book. I had just moved to Portland in like August or September of '97, and the week I arrived, there happened to be a Comic-Con there that I was able to get in on, and so I showed up, and I was doing my convention table thing, and someone who I didn't know at the time, but turned out much later to be Greg, came by my table and looked over my stuff, and I think he bought some Batman prints for me or something.
Cool.
And it wasn't until much later that I found out that Bob Schreck had sent him over and said, "Go check out that guy's stuff. He's a possible artist for that book of yours."
Wow.
Because I had done work for Bob when he was at Dark Horse years before. And so that was how it came together. Greg was, he was living in the area, but in Eugene, Oregon, which is about an hour or 2 south.
Sure. Yeah.
So because he was so close, we actually got to collaborate sort of in person at times. He came up, and when I first designed the main character of Whiteout, the U.S. Marshal Carrie Stetko. We went to this restaurant here in Portland where they put white butcher paper on the tables and leave a box of crayons on there. So we just spent the whole lunch with me sketching in crayon on the tablecloth and saying like this, and him going, no, more like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really good way to collaborate. And if you need a moment to think about the opinion you're going to offer. You just take a bite of the sandwich, and you can a nice excuse to be quiet and thoughtful for a minute. And something about crayons, this is something I recommend to a lot of young artists. If they're getting too much in their head about what they're working on, or if their stuff is getting stiff, or if they're too focused on clever brush technique or all the little fussy things that can keep an artist from actually producing work that looks as good as they're capable of, I tell them, sit down and work and draw with a crayon for an hour or so. Something about it just puts you back in that kid zone, so you could feel like you're playing, even though you're still applying all the stuff you've learned as an art student and a working artist.
That's great. That's a great idea. Again, these are the kind of tips, and that's why I'm glad I'm talking to artists these days. And then the artists can get something out of the conversation.
I hope so.
Not just writers. No, that's great, man. That's fantastic. Charlie, nice comment, Charlie. Charlie says that he met you at a Columbus Con in 1999, and you talked him into getting whiteout. That's fantastic, man.
Very cool.
So, I don't know what Patrick's reference is. Is this an issue you did of G.I. Joe 141? Tell me about it.
Well, it's like the first or second gig I got at Marvel. I was just I was applying to all the companies just by mailing, by cold calling, basically, just mailing packages of Xeroxes to every editor of the business every month. And sometimes stuff would come up because somebody else blew a deadline, and they'd contact me. And Marvel reached out to me about drawing this issue of G.I. Joe versus Transformers, issue number 141. And I had never seen either cartoon. Those shows fell into the zone where I had gotten out of cartoons.
Yeah, Steve, we're close enough in the same age.
Yeah.
Because, Thundercats, Transformers, and the G.I. Joe cartoons. It's like, no, you guys don't understand. I was trying to date girls then, okay? I wasn't watching Saturday morning cartoons anymore. I was trying to get laid at that point.
Exactly. So it was completely out of my zone. But I knew Larry Hama was writing it. And so
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I
love Larry.
I got the script, and it was a format I'd never seen before, but it was really cool. It was this sort of modified Marvel style thing where he just kind of would give you one sentence for each story beat on a page, and an idea of what they're talking about, but not the actual dialogue.
Wow.
It was really neat, and it was easy to draw because Larry's he's a great artist himself, and his story sense was perfect. I immediately knew how to draw it. What I didn't know how to draw was the characters. So I called my editor up and said, can you get me model sheets for these guys? There's 100 characters in this comic, and I'm flipping through the dozen back issues that I have, and trying to, okay, is this one is that Megatron? Is this And so he said, I'll try to get you some reference. And then the next day, I got a FedEx box, and I was expecting model sheets like they give in animation. Here's what the character looks like from the front. Here's what the side. Here's what his weapon looks like. They sent me a FedEx box that was just jammed full of toys. There's no name on any of the toys or anything. So I'm looking at the toys and looking at the comics and trying to figure out if they're the same guys. And I managed to do it. But the main thing I remember was the Megatron, which is, I guess, one of the Transformers. It had this thing was about over a dozen inches tall, and it had a voice chip in it, and I didn't know how to turn the thing off. There's no switch on it anywhere. So anytime I would move it to try to to pose it to draw from, it would go Megatron attack. And it was amusing the first 150 times that it happened, but I'm at the board for 10 hours a day listening to Megatron attack. And the first thing I did when I finished that gig was just grab that thing by one leg and just smack it into the brick wall of my apartment building until the head popped off.
Anyone with a 4-year-old with an annoying voice-activated toy knows exactly what you're talking about, man. Yeah. So I get it, man. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I told that to a G.I. Joe guy who told me, what, that was probably worth about $300 now.
Now, peace of mind is worth more, man. Don't
Yeah,
kid yourself. Charlie says, the crossover G.I. Joe Transformers issue? That's awesome. Did you design any of the G2 Transformers?
If I did, it was by accident.
All right.
Yeah, I was just trying to draw the characters that Larry specified in it, and not get them too off model.
All right, fair enough. Here, hold on one second here. What do we got? Oh, this is nice. Mario, you're very kind. Mario says, the book club was great. I enjoyed it so much. And if you gave me time to talk, I would have hijacked the conversation and talked about, Jag and Etol. That is, one of the players for the Dallas Mavericks, because, of course, Mario's a big Mavericks fan. You know, I had Norton on last night, Mike Norton.
Oh, wow.
And they have adapted Mike and Tim Seeley's comic revival, and it's going to be a sci-fi channel show. And one of the main actors is this sheriff, and it's played by David Three-Name. I forget what the actor's name, but he's the lead in Jag. And just inadvertently, I never watched Jag when it was on first run, and I'm like, oh, I never saw Jag, and I'm like, oh my god, it was on for 10 seasons, and I'm like, I like the Top Gun movies, and it kind of is. The elevator pitch was Top Gun meets A Few Good Men, because it's a lot of military court stuff, and also he's a former fighter pilot, and so there's a lot of action on aircraft carriers and the bases, and he's in fighter jets and things. And I'm like, I've totally been sucked in. Then I watched the trailer for the revival TV show, and I'm like, holy fuck, it's the guy from Jag. This is going to be great. So I'm really excited, man. So yeah, that's why the Jag reference. All right, Patrick, I'm going to see if I understand what you're saying here. Patrick wants to know, do you still use Xerox copy sheets machines like we did in the 90s? And he says, the book was released on my birthday, like 5 days before it in 1999. And let's see, what else did he say here? Did you work with Andrew Wildman, the same era of Marvel?
I didn't work with him, but I think he drew the issue before mine and the issue after mine.
Okay.
Never met him, though. As for the Xerox thing, he might be referring to when I did Whiteout. If people have seen what the comic looked like, every page is just covered in Zipatone. I wanted to, I was trying to draw a black and white book and make a lot of use of grays because it's set in Antarctica.
Yes. Yeah.
So I needed to use a lot of Zipatone to get those grays to reproduce well. Zipatone is a pattern of mechanically created dots, kind of like the background that's around our pictures here. If you
you mean like the comic stuff?
No, the
ones you posted.
The word balloon logo is up against these green lights.
Yes, of course. Yeah. It's like
that's kind of like how Zipatone works.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, really, if you look at like Silver Age comics, you can see those dots and everything. And I know Howard Chaykin, big Zipatone user back in the American flag and Times Square days and stuff.
And the real stuff was like $10 a sheet, and that's like what Odie was paying me to draw the comic. So I could not afford to use proper Zipatone, so I found a way to make my own really, really cheaply.
Oh wow, fun!
I learned that I could buy one sheet of these mechanically produced dots, and photocopy them onto crack and peel sheets of acetate that I would feed into a copying machine at Kinko's.
Sure.
And make bootleg Zipatone.
Brilliant.
And it meant that I could do all the special effects on the pages. It's all Photoshop before Photoshop.
Sure. Yeah. That's like 10 cents a copy, obviously. So great.
Exactly.
Genius.
Yeah. So it was a hack in the computer sense, but it totally worked. Yeah. A lot of my favorite cartoonists were weirdly reaching for all the digital tools that we now take for granted. They were trying to invent ways to get those tools before Photoshop or home computers existed. Stan Drake, who did one of my favorite newspaper strips, he commissioned IBM to make him a Selectric ball. The IBM Selectric typewriters had a ball with all of the
letters, and then
all the letters raised on them.
Yeah, those are old electric typewriters, everybody. Again, this is 20th
Old men
century
talking,
technology.
sorry. Yeah.
No, not at all, man. I'm just helping you out and then letting people like you're, because there's 20-somethings going, what?
Yeah,
What?
yeah. Anyway, he had IBM make him one of these balls with a comics lettering font on it, so that
Wow.
he could letter his comic on an electric typewriter and paste it in. Yeah, and this was like 1969 or something.
Was it Juliet Jones? Was that his?
Yeah.
There
If you
you
look
go.
at
Yeah,
the
that
later Juliet
comic strip.
Jones, you can see he's doing that, and he was the first cartoonist to have a Xerox machine in his office back when they were the size of a camper van.
Isn't that crazy, man?
Yeah, so that he could photocopy a photo of downtown Manhattan and run it through 6 or 7 times until it's high contrast. All this stuff that every cartoonist I know could do in 1.5 seconds with Manga Studio.
Well, of course, I'm assuming that's kind of how Kirby would take photographs and put them in panels in books and things. God, and truly, that's honestly, man, that's the kind of thing that someone really needs to like go and make like either a short video documentary or whatever. If I had the wherewithal, I would do it myself. But really, like examining those kind of techniques and showing the analog ways that these guys would solve these, image and graphic problems. I mean, God, maybe Steranko's like the last guy left that did anything near that. God, that'd be a great, the next time Jim does one of his Sunday night sessions on X, that's a great question and maybe it would be a great way to finally entice him to do a second word balloon. The only time I got Jim on was I moderated a panel that he was doing at Terrificon in Connecticut.
Oh wow.
And it's thank God. And really, Mitch, the guy who runs Terrificon, the owner of Terrificon, he's like, you want to do the Steranko panel? I'm like, dude, I've been trying to get Steranko on my show for 16 years. And Jim was always great to me and really nice. And, yeah, we'll do it one day, John. We'll do it one day, John. And just left me hanging for so many years. And I'm like, well, now I'm going to get you, asshole, because you're going to be at that convention and you need a straight man to feed you all your storylines and stuff. And yeah, he's hilarious. So yeah,
that's wonderful.
So, but no, exactly, man. No, and truly, like in the years of Howard's another guy that I can talk to about stuff like that. And I wonder, God, Steve, Steve, you are killing me with this great knowledge and this great information about Tex and what Stan Drake did and stuff, man.
I spent the first 25 years of my life just desperately trying to learn everything I could about comics. There's very few good sources. There were 3 books that gave you anything resembling comics history. Everyone had the same books. Comics
or process. Or like books about process. Go on, please.
Yeah, well, there's 3 books that gave you any history at all. There was Comics by Les Daniels, the one by Jules Pfeiffer, The Great Comic Book Heroes.
Yes.
And a collection of essays called All in Color for a Dime. And in there, you could glean little bits of stuff about how things were actually done. Then there was a fanzine called Cartoonist Interviews that.
Oh sure, David Anthony Kraft's magazine.
Yeah, and a lot of, and if you didn't have access to a good comic shop, you just couldn't find those things at all. So I was a junkyard archaeologist doing everything I could to get this stuff, and I was obsessed enough that when I learned it, it stuck. And once you have a framework for it, it's easy to pick up other things and put it all into context.
That's great, man. Yeah. There's another guy who, had I thought of it earlier, I could have gotten him on Word Balloon, David Anthony Kraft, because there's a local comic book writer who wrote this really long history of Korean war stories, and I can't remember the name of it, but we're like kind of ancient Korea and stuff, not 50s Korea War, Korean War, but he worked with David, and yeah, man, and I blew it. I mean, sadly, when it occurred to me, like he had already passed away, and I'm like, because truly, Comics Interview and Amazing Heroes, and to an extent too, obviously the Comics Journal, those are kind of the inspirations for Word Balloon. I mean, they really, and I love those magazines. And I am constantly, when I go looking through dollar bin boxes and stuff, those are the things I'm looking for the most are Amazing Heroes and Comics Interview and old Comics Journal issues and stuff. I love that stuff.
Yeah, and when you start like reaching and trying to read the history, you realize that for certain periods, all the history we have is down to like 3 or 4 people who went out and did the interviews and did the research. And
Yeah.
thank God for Bill Blackbeard for being yeah.
Those are great books. Absolutely. His comic strip collections and things. Yeah, man. No, I Steve, I hear you, man. And again, that's what I keep saying. Like since the 90s, every fart has been videotaped.
Yeah.
And we've got archive of it. But really, even in the 80s, that's kind of when 20th century history starts to get spotty. And forget about it. Again, you go back to Matt Brady and the tintype photos of the 1800s. They didn't document everything.
No.
And also, as a comic book podcaster and a person that is really interested in 20th century history, I want to get it right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it pisses me off when some of my contemporaries, and I'm a broken record sometimes about this. I'm sure there are Word Balloon listeners right going, here he goes again. But it's true. Like, that famous line from the man who shot Liberty Valance, print the legend. If the history's not real, print the legend. And that's the thing. I heard it went this way. And it's like, really? Well, let's talk to the guy that actually was there in the room. And let's get the straight story before that guy passes away. That's why I love Roy Thomas's Alter Ego magazine and all the great Silver and Golden Age artists and writers that he got on the record before they passed away and everything. So yeah, it's a shame. And also my dear friend of mine who is in library sciences, we're all worried about AI. And I certainly know from an art standpoint, the frustration and disappointment of the use of AI right now to generate art and things like that. But even another thing, my friend was telling me, because he's a big information guy, and he's like, what sucks is the AI bad information is part of the digital conversation now. And eventually it might shout out or shout down the real information. So it's really, at the same time, it's dumbing down the culture, and they're getting shit wrong.
Yeah.
So that's, not to depress everybody, but it's another wrinkle of the dangers of AI.
With as far as history, have you ever talked to Ken Quattro?
I'm aware of Ken. I have not had him on the show, and I'm aware of some of the fine work he does.
Yeah, he, among other things, he wrote Invisible Men, which is a history of black cartoonists in the Golden Age. I first met Ken in Ann Arbor. He was my FedEx delivery guy.
Wow.
Yeah. And he very quickly figured out that I was a comics guy because I'm getting all these FedEx packages from DC. And it turned out that he's a comics scholar and a historian and an original art collector, and so we every once in a while we'd get to actually just sit there and talk. He would very, very kindly hang out at my place while I finished a page. And had to get it off to FedEx before the deadline. So he'd sit around for a few minutes while I finished a page of Hawkman.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool. No, I'm really glad you mentioned him, dude, because again, I got to put him on my list of another guy that I got to get on to talk about that stuff. I had another guy named Ken Viola who made that fantastic mid '80s documentary about all the great comic book artists. Harlan Ellison narrates it, and you got Frank Miller when he's just a couple of years after Dark Knight, and got Bernie Wrightson when he's still a beautiful young man, and that's hilarious. And the best hunk of it, you can find it on YouTube, everybody, if you don't know what I'm talking about. There's a portion of it where they talk to Steve Ditko, and it's Steve Ditko's voice. He refuses to be on camera, but it's all this great Steve Ditko black and white art as he's giving his screed. And Will Eisner's in it, and Kirby is in it, and it's this wonderful thing. And I just was such a fan of it, and was happy to find it on YouTube. And I also, maybe I'd mentioned it on my show, but Ken heard my show, and he's like, "Hey man, just so you know, I made that movie." And I'm like, "Come on the show, Jesus Christ!" And then, and I'm happy to reveal this story. There's that new Frank Miller documentary that right now is still on the kind of the festival circuit and everything. And Selene Thomas, Frank's producer, contacted me and said, "Hey, I happen to notice that you had Ken on Word Balloon. we really want to use that interview footage of Frank for the documentary. Can you please put us in touch with Ken? I'm like, it'd be my pleasure, of course. So yeah, and now Frank owes me an interview because that was like I'm like the one thing I said, God, I go, I really want to talk to Frank. I go, at least one conversation with Frank. I met him a couple of years ago at one of the Fan Expo shows here in Chicago, and he was very sweet to me and everything. And Selene is very sweet. She's a big old movie freak as well. So I love them both. I think they're very fun people. But yeah, I'm like, Frank, I gave you a solid, man. I go, I think you owe me one. Come on,
I got to meet Frank just once, really. Shortly after he did the cover for Whiteout, we were both catching the L from Rosemont into the city at the Chicago Comic-Con.
Yeah,
and we wound up sitting next to each other on the train for an hour, and I just got to just talk with him peer to peer instead of being like on the other end of a table. It was great.
That's excellent. That's cool. My first meeting with him, and I told him about this, and it was so funny because Frank is clean and sober now and everything, and I'm really glad because like 12 years ago there was that one picture of him with Robert Rodriguez, the director, and Frank looked like he was on death row. I mean, he really looked like hell, and I think we were all kind of scared of, gee, I really hope Frank doesn't pass away, and thank God he cleaned himself up. But I was telling him back in 2006, after the Eisners, when everybody files out of the banquet room and they're just hanging out in the lobby and stuff and just chilling, I went up to him, and it was my first San Diego, and I had run out of business cards. And I said, hey, I do a podcast. It's called Word Balloon. I'd love to have you on. And he shrugs. He goes, hey, give me a business card. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm out of business cards. He shrugs, and he walked away. And I'm like, but. And I remind him, and he's like, oh, John, I'm so sorry. I was such an asshole. I'm like, Frank, I've been dining on that story for 17 years. I'm like, do not sweat it at all. And I go, no, shame on me for not being a pro on my side and being prepared for that kind of moment and everything. But yeah, and he goes, no. And I'm like, well, again, come on my show and all is forgiven, Frank. Don't worry about it. So yeah,
great.
Crazy. What are you going to do? So too damn funny, man. Steve, this was great. Truly, it exceeded expectations, and really, I always, this is the great thing about doing Word Balloon, everybody. These tangents beyond the obvious things that we're going to talk about. We learn a lot of stuff. There's great nostalgia for people like me who bought those coverless comics, in those plastic bags and not knowing what we were going to get until we ripped it open and everything. So yeah, and beyond the obvious of, I hope they trade Metamorpho, buddy.
They will. It's already solicited, actually.
Oh, wonderful.
Excellent. Yeah, I think they wanted to make sure that was available when people were coming out of the Superman movie.
And that makes sense, too. And here's hoping that you and Al get a chance to revisit it, and maybe there might be interest, and maybe there'll be eventually a James Gunn Metamorpho movie or whatever. We'll see. But the other great collection, and here, actually, instead of showing the image I have, I'll put this back up. Everybody look forward to the collection and more of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, this fantastic revisit series that Lieber and Fraction did. And hell, you've seen some amazing images. Did we show this image?
Yes.
Yes, we did. Of course we did. Yeah, that's Jimmy in bed with the bow tie and the bouquet, covering the good bits. So no, I love it, man. That's fantastic. And truly, Steve, great to talk to you.
Real pleasure.
Sometimes I miss things because there are so many comics out there and everything. So when there's something new, please tap me on the shoulder, because it's always great to see it. It's, man, that trip that I made back in Portland at Rose City back in 2018, and Parker's like, hey, you should come to the Helioscope for the day and see everybody. And seriously, man, it was so great just chilling with you guys. And I had every intention of breaking out my recorder. And I'm like, fuck it, man. We're just having a good time talking. I'm like, nobody has to worry. And we're just, everything's off the record. We could just all bullshit and everything. And it really meant a lot. And also great to meet Sarah and everything. So my best to Sarah.
Come on down again, man.
I would love to, man. Because Rose City is a wonderful convention. But as who's saying, was it Simply Red? Money's too tight to mention. As but I'll get there. I'll come back. Steve, if I could, and I always say this to my Portland friends, I'd move to Portland in a heartbeat, because truly I can count 20 people like yourself and Parker, Rucka, Bendis, Fraction, all these people, Wagner, you know, and I continue to meet more great Portland people that are part of the comics community. So I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? I mean, because, you know, obviously I grew up here in Chicago, so I have so many friends. I'm like, I got other friends in Portland too, man. So it would be great. You guys would be sick of me if I were to ever move there. So
we'll figure out a way to get you out here.
thanks, brother. Absolutely. And yeah, thanks to everybody for watching. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I know I did, and listening. And right now, I actually recorded a podcast today. A friend of mine, Tim Monroe, who's doing a really fun podcast called I've Always Wanted to Talk About ... And it's a brand new podcast. It's great, really interesting conversations. And he's like, you want to talk about comics? I'm like, well, I always talk about comics. You want to talk about boxing? I always talk about boxing. I said, what I really want to talk about is Star Trek. So we spent a good 40 minutes talking about Star Trek.
Oh,
and
good.
yeah, you know, sadly, Steve's like, yeah, I know your deal with Star Trek. Exactly. But no, it was a blast. So I have a feeling after releasing Steve's episode, that's going to be the next episode. But I got some other surprises coming up, and it's going to be a great month in June here on Word Balloon. I certainly hope you'll join us. Until next time, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.